Shrouded in Silence project delves into the profound themes of death, dying and grief. Through a diverse collection of artworks, talks, films, podcasts and workshops, it invites meaningful conversations around these sensitive topics. The project showcases the work of artists Mary Branson, Annalise Lim, Carl Newman and Luna Russell, aiming to inspire introspection and reflection. Additionally, the exhibition features the evocative work of Tristan Hennigs, accompanied by a poignant soundscape created by Miles Russell. The project includes the contributions of local stitchers, poets and creative writers, enriching the project with their unique perspectives. The idea about creating a project around death, dying and grief has kind of been ongoing for quite a long time. But in 2019, I spoke to Carl Newman and Ali Clark about creating an arts project that dealt with a taboo subject, something that was really close to my heart, that we don't talk about enough. And I feel that we'd all feel a lot better if we kind of talk about it and share our feelings and have a better understanding of how our end of life can have a more positive impact on the earth and those people that we leave behind. So Shrouded in Silence came out of that. Originally we were going to do a pilot project. I had a meeting in March 2020 and at Clandon Natural Burial Ground, and we were going to do a workshop that summer. And then of course within a couple of weeks we were in full lockdown. So over that time we've created Whistle Stop Arts Company, and Annalise and I have really worked hard at creating community arts projects that connect with people, that connect with place, that are uplifting, that are supportive, that make a difference. And that's really what we really hope that Shrouded in Silence does. So we met with lots of different partners and we were really amazed at the support and the interest from arts officers and from Surrey Hills Arts, Surrey Hills Trust, about creating something that pushes that conversation into everyday life and gives people the opportunity to be able to talk about a difficult subject, but know that they're doing that in a safe space. And I think that's what we've created with Shrouded in Silence. It's been an absolute privilege to be able to have conversations with people coming to the exhibition, to the talks, to the workshops, and for people to write in the visitors book and say, you've given me an opportunity, you've given me a place where I don't feel ashamed of my emotions, and you've given me a time to reflect and spend time reading about other people's experiences and connecting with poetry that really has helped those people process their feelings. And I think that's what the arts is really, really good at, is showing people how they can experience difficult things.
So I work predominantly as a musician in theatre and a composer. So I musically direct shows where I conduct theatre shows and work with musicians and bands. And then I compose music for shows and create sound designs for shows, so all the sound effects and the oral stuff for theatre shows. Luna asked me would I create a soundscape for this project, so which I've jumped at the chance because music and sound can be so supportive to emotional experiences. So the soundscape is based on a meadow, which is partly because the project ends up at the Clandon burial site. And we've taken the time of a sort of day, a shape of a day. So it starts off with the sound of sort of dawn. There are birds waking up, there's cockerels crowing, and we feel the shape of the day. There's cows in the field. It gets warmer, there's a soft breeze. And we've built up all these sound effects to create this calming atmosphere that goes through the day. We have a plane goes over at midday. We have an afternoon where the heat of the sun calms the breeze, and the cows calm, and then we get into dusk and cricket starts to sing more, and we lose the birds and there's owls crying, and it takes about 20 minutes, this shape, and then we go back to silence in the room for 5 minutes, and then it starts again.
and I've created a piece called The Time in Between. It is based on a number of experiences, and it's actually developed so much from the very start. So the piece now is a hand-stitched book that's illustrated in watercolour and carbon ink, but it very much has evolved over time since I first started talking to Luna about this project. So my experiences as a live scribe artist, I thought, great, I'll use those, I'll get to show off what live scribing is because people don't know what it is. And I thought I would create a piece about somebody's life, drawn, cartoon, graphically, on a big canvas. But actually when it came to it, being in this space, knowing the artworks that it was going up against, I thought it needed to be a lot softer and a lot more delicate. So it is now watercolour, and it's very much a story of my grandma's life. So I was 18 when my grandmother died, she was 98. So I had 80 years of not knowing much about her life. Obviously we spoke about her life, but it isn't until later, when kind of grief has subsided a little bit, that I had these deeper conversations with my mum. And actually I learnt so much about the family. And plus Google these days, you can search anything. Ancestry websites are so common. So I actually got loads of information, and then I brought that back to my mum, and we could have all these rich conversations, which then sparked other memories from her. And I found it so interesting. We learnt so much about the family, and some rather salacious gossip as well. So the poem, The Dash, is all about that number, that birthday dash death date that's often used in memorials, tombstones, eulogies, and that we're often reduced just to that number. But that dash in between the birthday and the death date has so much weight to it. So the piece I've created is a long concertina book with the birth date, the death date, and then the illustrated images of my Nana's life throughout it in chronological order.
My usual job is as a public artist, so I'm very public about the work I make and the things that I'm thinking about. This time I was being quite private, and I was working in clay, and I find that clay is a really healing medium to work with. And so I created some vessels that reflected the different stages of grief. And the first one, which is Last Breath, as my mother was in the last stages of dying, she had Alzheimer's, so she wasn't able to communicate with me. And she hadn't for the last 10 years before she passed. And the only thing that was left between us was her breath. And so at the last stages of dying, there's a breathing pattern called Chain Stokes. And that breathing pattern is common to everybody. And I'd heard it when my father had passed in 2018, and I was hearing it in my mother's breath. And I wanted to record it because that was the only thing that we had left between us, was her very fragile breath. The vessel that I have her breath contained in, I use smoke firing, which it's a very ancient form of firing, and you use organic materials. So I took trips down to the seaside and picked up seaweed, and people gave me horsehair and all sorts of very beautiful materials that I was able to fire. It felt very ritualistic, the process of firing the pot. And so quite a lot in my work, you'll see these ancient motifs, and I just thought about the grief that I was going through is something that most probably from the age, the dawn of time, people have experienced this. And so I got a lot of, I felt a lot of support from all these people that have gone before me that have experienced grief, and I wanted to put that into the pot.
I graduated from art school in the early 1980s and have been painting and making paintings in one way or another ever since. Have thought about making this piece since about 2018, I think. My mother died of dementia in 2020, and the work that I've made is about the experience of losing her through dementia. And there's a sort of question that sits behind the work and was the sort of impetus for it. And the question is simply, where are you? Where have you gone? And so the piece of work that I've made is called Refuge, and it's not a portrait of her as such, but it's a picture of a place that I associate with her and somewhere that I know well. My mother was Swedish, and it's a place in the forest in north of Sweden. It's a fishing cabin that her father bought in the 1940s and placed in the forest. And I thought it would be interesting to make a painting of that place and then make that painting again, but as a reverse, so reversing the tones and the colours, to make a very familiar place look unfamiliar in that way. And I kind of did it as a sort of an experiment, because I wondered what it would feel like once I'd made the work, just to sit between the two canvases myself and to see whether I got the same uneasy, strange feeling as I did when I was sitting with my mum, thinking, you know, where are you? And I wanted the paintings to feel like you were actually in the space. So they needed to be of a size so that when you're standing in front of them, you feel like you're kind of entering into the space and you're part of the scene.
And so I wanted to create something that was very much place-based. Our project is being delivered in Surrey. It tours Surrey venues. So I wanted to kind of share that rather than about one specific person. So within the shrouds that I've created, I've used 87 circles that represent the parishes within Surrey. And within those are 17,574 stitches, and they represent the people who have died in the county since I was inspired by a golden thread painting by John Melhugh's Shrouded at Watts Gallery in the autumn 2022 to the time that I finished stitching the piece in January 24. And I think by using natural dyes, we can show how we can create beautiful things without harming the environment. So the gold thread is created using onion skins, and the other threads are dyed with tea. So they're really simple, everyday materials that can create something really beautiful. So within my installation, there's also a coffin that's made of cotton rag paper, and then it's lined with a beautiful soft fleece, a bamboo fleece. On top of that is stitched some Victorian coffin liners, which have this beautiful fern-like design. And that carries on from the shroud, is that it depicts the same patterning and the same colour of threads. And within the exhibition, the coffin will sit on a plinth, and we invite people to write a message or a story or a memory or a secret or draw a picture on a piece of paper that they scroll up, tie, put in the coffin, and then we'll take those to our final event at Calandon Natural Burial Ground, and all of those scrolls will never be read, but they'll be committed to the soil in memory of this project and in memory of all those people that they've wanted to kind of share a moment with.
When my husband and I lost our first child, it was devastating, and I was searching for a way to process my grief, and I did everything. I was doing counseling, I was journaling, and I got involved in a painting class, which I found really therapeutic because I had grief rumbling in my brain 24 hours a day, and to just be quiet and not have to talk and paint was extremely therapeutic for me. We have our painting at home, it's actually on the wall, and it felt very much a capsule of that episode in our life. And I wanted to offer it to Annalise and Luna for the exhibit if they wanted to include it, because perhaps that part of the conversation might be missing, and it is a difficult one to talk about the loss of a child. It's awkward, and I thought if I could contribute in some way to allow people to have that conversation and offer support, the support groups that help my husband and I, that perhaps that would further a conversation for someone who might need it. I'm standing here inside the gallery looking at a wall of creative writing responses to the subject matter, as well as stitchers, and 40 to 50 different individuals have participated across a very different demographic, from young to old, men to women.
The ladies in my group have taken part by embroidering antique handkerchiefs with motifs or maybe initials, which have been included in the exhibition.
And this really, really resonated with me personally, and clearly with people who've been coming to the exhibition. And the visitors book just shows how much this has meant to people, to have, I think somebody called it a safe space, to kind of be there with their grief.
It's been really lovely response, overwhelmingly positive. I've noticed that people spend a lot longer at this exhibition than in general, and they often feel compelled to come and have a little chat and share their experiences. I think it's been moving in a very uplifting way. People are moved, often to tears, but they come over with a little light in their eyes, saying how beautiful it was, how moving it was. And they want to chat and share, which I think is the aim, really, isn't it? To start a conversation, and if it moves people in the right way, then it's done its job.
The final Shrouded in Silence event took place at Clandon Wood Natural Burial Ground and was led by celebrant Mandy East. Attendees enjoyed films, poetry and creative writing throughout the evening. The event culminated in a silent walk to an open grave where the scrolls created during the project were committed to the soil, bringing the project to a gentle close and allowing for reflection on conversations and experiences. We extend our sincere gratitude to everyone who contributed to this film, which is part of the Shrouded in Silence project and was made possible by our generous supporters and funders.